1962 Sunbeam Alpine Series 2. Many years ago, I bought a Series 5 Sunbeam Alpine, which my wife loved very much. She thought it was really neat, and eventually I got rid of it. In 2013, and I just wanted to get my wife a car for her to enjoy. And I found an ad for this Sunbeam Alpine. It was in Illinois. It was a Series 2, an early one. We had a Series 5, the last one they made. I agreed to buy it sight unseen, which is usually a mistake, and the gentleman drove it from Illinois, pretty much sight unseen, paid a deposit. He drove it down, and I was going to fly him home, which I did. I nearly walked away from the deal, said keep the deposit. The car looked like a golf ball. There was not a panel on the car that did not have dents in it like a golf ball does. It had no interior. It was a mess. But I went on and bought it.
Hail damage? Is that what it was?
Oh, no. It just banged, dents, wrecks.
Really?
It was a mess. Rust. These cars, like so many British cars of this age, are subject to rust, bad rust. And this was a typical example. A little bit of money is how you get them from there to here. And some people that are very talented. And there's a history here. You may have heard of Bond, yes. James Bond. They made movies about him. The first James Bond movie was Dr. No. And of course, James Bond always had a gal. Ursula Andress was his gal in Dr. No. Yep. And he always has a car. In Dr. No, you will remember, he had a blue 1962 Sunbeam Alpine Series 2. Interesting story. The production company asked Jaguar and Aston Martin to provide a car for this new movie that they were going to make. And it was going to be a series. They said, nah, what are you talking about? We're not interested in that. So they actually rented 1962 Series 2 Sunbeam Alpine from a physician in Jamaica, where it was filmed. Dr. No was filmed in Jamaica. They rented this guy's car to make the movie. And you'll see it's being chased by a hearse. It was really funny. I've had two Bond cars, this one and BMW Z8. Looking straight through the windshield at the tail fins, which I love so much. It's kind of an interesting angle if you can see the tail fins through the windshield.
How long did it take to restore all this?
It actually got put aside because I bought the Volvo, which also has a story. Restored the Volvo first, so this didn't get finished for about 4 years. Of course, they're never finished. You're never finished. It needed some mechanical work. The transmission needed some work, and so I took it to my source in Good, Virginia, MG Matters. He does some of the mechanical stuff on my British cars. As always, the body and paint was done by Rutledge Paint and Body on Shenandoah.
Sunbeam was a very short-lived...
Yep, Sunbeam was made by Roots Group, R-O-O-T-S, Roots Group in England. They also made the same body with the help of Carroll Shelby, stuck a V8 in this sucker, and they call it the Tiger. Now, the Tigers are the collectible ones now because they got a V8 in them. A Ford, either a 260 or a 289, depending on the year. The Alpines kind of have been forgotten. Small four-cylinder engine. They've kind of been forgotten, and like so many old British cars, they tend to rust badly, and there aren't a whole lot of Alpines left. There were 45,000 made, 5 series. Series 1, 2, and 3 had the high tail fins. 4 and 5 it was flat. And the Tigers were all later, basically a Series 4 or 5 body. This car is actually extremely original, and again, it's the original color, Wedgwood blue. It's a 1.8 liter 4-cylinder. That is not the original carburetor. It came with two Zenith carburetors. I have the original carburetors and manifold, or a set that are original. The Weber that's on it makes it a little more dependable and a little bit peppier. This is a relatively peppy little car. In fact, a lot of these were raced in Sports Car Club of America racing. It was an F production car and did very well historically. Other than the carburetor, this car is essentially 100% original. If you can read the ID plate on it, it will give you a code number for the paint, which is Wedgwood Blue. A lot of people look at this car and they really like the color.
I would have to say I'm one of them.
The wire wheels with the 3-spoke knockoffs, that is original. Not a whole lot of cars come with the 3. You'll see the 2 spokes on like all of the MGs and whatnot. They're 13-inch, tiny little wheels. It was fairly well equipped in terms of instrumentation for its time. Of course, speedometer and tachometer, oil pressure gauge, fuel gauge, water temperature, amp meter. That's unusual. The instruments were pretty good. There were 2 of them that weren't working. The fuel gauge and the speedometer weren't working, but there was basically no interior in it.
I would imagine this is probably pretty difficult to get anything for as far as parts. Are there anybody that still make parts for them?
It's the worst car I've ever had to get parts for. The Austin Healey, the Volvo, similar vintages are easy to get parts. This car is very, very difficult to get parts for. I did get a windshield from a company called British Victoria, but the rubber gasket for the windshield, nobody had. I had to have this custom made in England, that gasket, be able to put a windshield in it. The Sunbeam Club of America has essentially ceased to exist. There is a club called IThis Alpine East, and there's also a West Coast version that I belong to. I have attended one of their events. It was the first time I showed the Alpine, took best in show. I drive them, I don't trailer them. I have a trailer, but I don't trailer them. This piece right here that is held down by a strap, that's the crank to start the car. Like an old Model T, you'll see a hole above the license tag. You put the crank in, you start the car. You don't see that very often. In fact, you don't see the crank. Even the ones that have been restored and are still out and about, cranks are pretty hard to find. An original type knockoff hammer where it would be correctly. As you can see, not a whole lot of trunk room.
Nope. How big is your gas tank? Is that like
It's small. It's 8 gallons. This car was remarkably, even though it had sat outside for a number of years, it was remarkably rust-free. Very unusual. So we didn't have to do a frame off on this, thank goodness. I just love the tail fins on this car. They're pretty subtle until you really look at them. Unfortunately, there aren't a whole lot of Alpines left, so they just basically were allowed to rust away.
Yeah.